Alright guys, welcome back to PacWestBigfoot.com, and here's the deal. I had a couple trolls out there following me on old YouTube here. Tell me lip smacking, lip smacking. Listen guys, if you don't like these things, you don't have to listen to them. You can find somewhere else to go. If you're a troll, just go be a troll somewhere else. Thank you. Anyways, thank you very much to Kimberly. She will be getting, you will be getting your stickers this next week. A nice little gift for the drawing this week from PacWestBigfoot.com. So I want to say thank you very much, Kimberly, for being out there and listening in and being a valued subscriber here on the YouTube channel and to the blog. So here's the deal. Pretty soon, come the very beginning of 2017, we're going to start doing some live calls and going over some encounters and things like that here at PacWest Bigfoot. For now, we're going to keep doing this, however, and we will continue this through next year as well, where I would get some of these encounter stories from you guys, go ahead and write them out, add them into the blog, and read them back, because a lot of people really don't want to be interviewed. They don't want to have to talk. They just want to share their encounter via some, email and whatnot. And so I'll go ahead and continually read these and add these to the blog itself. Anyways, with that, let me get a little sip of the old Sasquatch coffee real quick. Alright, and there really is a thing, Sasquatch coffee. You can get it out of Garibaldi, Oregon, but you can go to SasquatchCoffee.com. Alright, guys. Here is this week's read. It's called Oh Momma, That Bigfoot Capsized My Fishing Boat. Yes, that Bigfoot capsized my boat, with me and my fiance in it at the time. Here's our story of getting too close to Bigfoot while fishing in Central Oregon, a little over 5 years ago. My fiance and I are avid fishermen. We love to travel all over the Pacific Northwest to fish, and even head out to do some deep sea fishing from time to time. However, our favorite is fly fishing in either lakes or rivers. What we came across one day, however, was amazing, scary at first, but amazing, and eventually we saw it as well. Here's our story of Bigfoot capsizing our boat. Part 1. Fishing Linton Lake. Three Sisters Wilderness area has always been a great place for my fiance and myself to fish. From the McKenzie River to Linton Lake, where the encounter took place, and the creek that feeds it, we simply love to fish all over our region. Off the beaten path of the McKenzie Highway is a small but deep lake called Linton Lake. This place has been an awesome little secret spot for my love and me for the last 2 years. Our favorite spot, of course, is where Linton Creek spills into the lake itself. Facing the creek, to the left, is more of a flat picnic area, minus picnic tables. And to the right, well, it is all hillside with a thick edge of coniferous trees blocking almost all view into it for the, to the forest, past 10 yards or so. Recently, the week before actually, my better half, I'll call her Christine, and I purchased a new Pelican Bass Raider 10E two-person fishing boat. More like a floating raft with 2 seats set high really, but cool nonetheless. We wanted to try it out as soon as possible and decided on a favorite place just west, about an hour from where we still live today, in Leesburg, Oregon. It was a crisp October morning, foggy and a little slick on the road. The weather that day was the same at the lake as it was at home, except more fog and low clouds, and the surrounding forest was almost impossible to see into from the road or the shore. As a matter of fact, that day, well, we could not see 10 feet past the trees. Packed up and on the road, we were putting in the lake just before 6 a.m. Brown trout, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, and if you're desperate, you can add crappie to the list of fish you can catch in Lake Linton. As far as Christine and I were concerned that day, we were there for some brown trout. What we got, however, was something else, and it was brown too. We could come to find out later. Capsizing my fishing boat, Part 2. Like I said above, that day, the morning would not give way to any sunlight. It was a typical gray and foggy day in the Pacific Northwest. Unfortunately, however, the rain would be missing. Fortunately, however, the rain would be missing from the picture. Thank goodness. We left the truck near the edge of the lake where we put in, and yes, you need a 4-wheel drive to get out here sometimes. We put in and jumped on our new craft with poles and fishing tackle ready. I have to admit, it was a real answer to prayer meeting Christine, and now about to marry her, I was very happy because we shared many passions like fishing. There's nothing better than sharing a passion for something with the person you love. As I started the little motor that would replace the oars to get us out there, the morning was something peaceful to observe at first. Here and there a wild duck would land in the water with a splash, and the mist would move across the surface of the water as we moved into place. Our favorite spot was there where the creek dumped into the lake itself. Naturally speaking, fishing is always better where the mouth of a creek or where a river spills into a larger body of water, like a river into an ocean or an estuary. But we were lake fishing this crisp, foggy morning in the Pac West that day. Our first of two events was short, and it happened within 30 minutes of being there, so our fishing trip was not a trip more than it was an incident we ran from as fast as possible. It started within just a few minutes of pulling up in front of the creek. To the left where we fished, there was a large flat area that consisted of tall grass and volcanic rock, with a tree line that sat about 35 yards back from the edge of the water. To the right side, however, was a hillside, a steep one. The water's edge here was rocky with tall grass, but above 10 feet of it, the tree line started, and past that you could not see a thing that day. Christine was the first one to have her pole in the water, and 2 minutes later was giving me that I got a bite face I've become used to. Eventually, though, I got mine in the lake, and we started a quiet conversation of wedding plans. As I was casting in for the third time, and yes, I'm a little impatient, that is when the first rock flew past us. Mind you, it was damp out there that day. No rain that morning, but it had been raining on and off for days, so hearing something in the forest come upon us was not going to happen. An elephant could have come through, and we might not hear it walking in the soft, moist ground. But splash! A rock came past our heads, landing in the water about 8 to 9 feet on the opposite side of the boat from the tree line. Both of us were caught by surprise and had no idea other than the right side, the forest side, was where the rock came from. It was a decent-sized rock as well, because the splash was a pretty big splash. Christine looked at me, asking what throws rocks out here, and I told her I had no idea. Figured it might be some jokers hiking by on the trail that ran through that side of the lake, and hopefully they were gone now. After about 2 minutes, we just shrugged our shoulders, and without another sound to surprise us, we got back to fishing. But about 10 or 15 minutes later, we were sprayed. Swoosh, splash, kerplunk. Every sound a large rock or slab of rock can make when hitting water made it right there next to our boat. And with it came the cold water in our faces, hitting so close to the boat this time, about a foot from hitting it, actually. I looked at Christine and then followed her gaze up into the woods. Neither of us could see a thing past 10 to 15 feet up through there. It was just too dense and too dark in there. As we looked back at each other, that is when it hit us. A large, more or less boulder came smashing down on the side of the new boat, jolting us so hard we both went over into the cold, dark water of the lake. While the boat is pretty tough, the seats make for a little bit more of a precarious situation when being tossed around in the water. So over we went, as well as our poles, the tackle box, and our thermos of hot coffee. As we surfaced, we were breathing heavy and spitting out lake water. Fortunately, the boat was made of some pretty strong and durable stuff, as I said, and heck, it only got a scratch and a little ding on the side in the end. As for us, well, we got out and onto the boat in a hurry, grabbed what we could out of the water. I started the little motor, and we were off towards the other side of the lake where we put in and parked. Christine kept her eyes probing back and forth along the lakeside for any movement at all. Whomever it was, we did not want it cutting us off from the truck. Once on land, Christine ran to the truck and grabbed the rifle from the back window rack and stood her ground as I loaded up the boat and what was left of our gear. 20 minutes later, everything was ready to go, and everything that is but us. We wanted to know what in the world just happened. What throws rocks that big in the forests of Oregon? What in the world is going on? As we decided to pack it in without any answers, the most blood-curdling scream we've ever heard came from across the lake in the direction of the rock throwing. A split second after that, we heard movement, like something or someone crashing through the forest in the same area. Bigfoot? That was what I asked her, and she looked at me as if to say, what else in the world could it be? We jumped in the truck and left that morning in a hurry. As we drove home, we played what happened over and over in our minds, trying to make sense out of everything. My wife, the Bigfoot hunter. Part 3. It was some day, a day that changed our lives and our passions and hobbies. Today, the wife and I are now out hunting this elusive creature. Well, not hunting, but doing our own research, actually. Since the incident at Linton Lake, the wife and I have been doing a lot of research around the Sisters Wilderness area instead of fishing as much. Matter of fact, my wife even started a local BFRO chapter that here and there actually gets some reports to this day, just over 5 years later after the encounter. As for me, well, I became a believer 100% less than a year later. One day the wife said she wanted to head back up to do some research around the lake, again, for the umpteenth time. Of course, I'm a very supportive guy and always love to hang out with Christine whenever I can. I was just hoping for somewhere else new that weekend. But thank goodness she stuck to her guns when I put out the idea of hitting a different area. Why? Well, we saw something that day. Heck, I saw something that day that made me take a second look at the possibilities of what can exist on God's green earth. We arrived early, although we parked literally 2 miles away to keep the noise to a minimum and walked in. Like the day we came fishing, it was cloudy, cold, and wet morning. However, this time there was a slight drizzle of rain. We sat back just a bit into the line of scrub brush on the opposite side of the lake in which our boat was capsized that day. Hot coffee in a thermos, plastic tarp covering over us. I watched as my wife began to intently stare out across the lake. She almost gasped as she took my chin and began to point my head in the direction just east, about 45 yards from where the creek spills into the lake. It was amazing, shocking, and I was literally in awe of what stood there before us barely 100 yards away. It was a female Bigfoot. She stood there nearly 8 feet tall, and yes, like the Patty film, you could tell it was a female. Not to mention, a few seconds later, we would be even more amazed. While the scene itself was rather, well, enchanting almost, the size, the hair-covered body, and the face itself was enough to make you feel a little scared and freaked out. I would come to understand that day why some call it a literal monster. Like a giant 8-man creature animal thing all wrapped up in one. However, as I stared into the abyss, the something that made this scene enchanting stood up about 10 feet behind her. All of a sudden, to mine and my wife's amazement, a young Bigfoot no taller than 3 to 4 feet suddenly stood up out of the tall grass. At that moment, my wife and I made the sound, what sounded like a gasp of amazement, and unfortunately, I think the adult female heard us as she looked across the lake in our direction. Suddenly, I could see her make a little motion with her hand and could sense she made a little quick sound. As she did, she picked up the little one up that was now right next to her, wide-eyed, threw it up on her back, and was gone. They stepped off into the thick forest, out of sight, but never out of mind. I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, smiled, and said we could go home now. Of course, we still go back, hoping to see Margot and the little one today. Yes, my wife named her Margot. We have not seen either of them since that day, but once in a while we hear a report here and there from people saying they hear voices way out in the woods, or feel like they're being watched on Linton Lake. And I know it's her, and I hope she and the little one are doing well.